It is not hard to come up with all the reasons why ADHD can be difficult to live with. I could list off all of the lost items and missed meetings, forgotten flights, awkward social situations, you name it, I've experienced it. However, ADHD is not something that comes and goes or that you can cure. It's just something that you deal with. And the more that you can embrace your strengths, the more you can bend the world towards you in a way that makes sense for you and that you don't need to feel like you're driving a car with square wheels all the time. So in order to do that, we really need to be looking at our strengths. And obviously, there's individual strengths that everybody has, but then there's a few universal strengths I see amongst those of us with ADHD that I don't think are talked about enough. So I'm going to talk about them today because you should be aware of this and also how to use that strength in your life as a relevant skill. So before we get into that, I just want to introduce myself in case this is the first time we've met. Heidi ho. My name is Karen McGill. I am an ADHD coach. I have ADHD, and since I've got diagnosed at midlife, I have learned strategies and just effective ways of living with ADHD. And now I'm actually living a better life than I ever have before prior to my diagnosis. So without further ado, let's jump into some of the strengths that I'm seeing that you may not be recognizing is not a universal strength. Strength number 1, we see the big picture in 4D. Now, I think it's great to be a detail-oriented person. That's a great strength. But you know what? Most CEOs, most visionaries, most successful entrepreneurs are vision thinkers. They are the visionary. They're the ones that come up with the big picture in full color, and they're able to speak to it passionately. And that's why they're able to get investors and employees and people to buy into their dreams because they have a dream and it's clear. Now, they may not be that person that comes up with the step-by-step plan to get there, and that's totally fine. We all have our own strengths. So if you're somebody who's in a position perhaps at work that requires a lot of detail management, maybe it's time to rethink the career you're in or make small shifts in your career so that you can get accommodations. What might that look like? Asking for a partner or a buddy who is really detail-oriented to help you walk through your vision. Maybe you do something else for them in return, but what you would ask of them is to just sit with you and you verbally process your idea or vision or plan for what it is you want to do and ask them to ask you questions. So, okay, this is your big picture. How does that happen? What's the first step? What's the step after that? Do you have anything that needs to line up before this thing happens? At what point does that need to happen in order for you to meet your deadline? All we need is to externalize that executive function piece, and we can totally breeze through the details, no problem. If it comes to things like budgeting and numbers where you're constantly noodling on them, having somebody else double check your work is going to be priceless. And take that from somebody who used to manage multi-million-dollar budgets. I don't know how I did it. So why is this a strength for us, especially at work? Like I said, when you have the big picture, when you have the idea of how things are going to roll, then it's very easy to communicate that to other people and get buy-in. Also, we see everybody's side. We are really good at understanding everybody's point of view because of that divergent thinking and actually coming to a place where we can find the middle ground. That makes us really good mediators. It also makes us compassionate leaders, compassionate coworkers, because we have the empathy and we see other people struggling and we know that the struggle is real because we have it ourselves. So really think about these things in the context of your career. If you can move yourself in a direction where you're moving away from smaller details or into groups or teams where there's a project manager you can lean on, you're going to thrive. And if you can't find that situation, then find yourself that body double who will be willing to ask you those pertinent questions so that you can do the actual nitty-gritty detail yourself. Strength number 2 is our energy. We know how to bring it. Now, this can be a blessing and a curse. So provided you're doing something that you're interested in, then you can just keep going and going and going. You are creative, you are energetic, and you are focused on whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. However, it does have a downside, and that is we don't necessarily have the off switch. So we can go and go and go faster than the Energizer Bunny, but at some point, we just collapse because, like I said, we don't have that off switch. So how do we figure this out and really lean into that as a strength? Well, my first suggestion would be to externalize some markers where there's a prompt coming from an external situation that at that point you need to start turning off that hyper focus. So that might be somebody calling you to say, hey, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to wind down and come home, and give yourself a little bit of time to transition into that. Or it could be alarms, it could be Alexa. She likes to remind me of a variety of different things in the day when I'm hyper focusing. The other thing that you really want to understand is how you bring that energy up and use it as a superpower. So energy is something that's not just a wealth spring of ongoing gifts. We have to manage our energy. And very often, if we don't know what gives us energy, it's more tricky to call upon it when we need it. So the key here is to get crystal clear on what gives you energy and what drains it. Number 3, we are cool as cucumbers in chaos. Now, you might not believe this, but let's think about this for a second. We are no strangers to chaos. We have spent a lifetime of, creating fires and then having to put them out. So this is not our first rodeo when it comes to chaotic situations or surprises or anything like that. We have done this 7 million times. So that has given us some compensatory skills and emotional calluses where chaos or unexpected things come up. We know how to deal with it. And in fact, ADHDers actually create more theta waves in their brain when the need to hyperfocus comes up. So that means that when there's an urgent situation that we need to hyperfocus on, we can hyperfocus better than the average bear. So where does this come up as a really interesting skill? Well, in emergency rooms, like I said, I worked in event management in the past where things go wrong all the time and you've got to be on in order to problem solve and deal with whatever's going on. Any of these sort of first responder jobs or just situations where things are sometimes unpredictable, we can often be the best person on the scene to get things done. Number 4, ADHDers are typically quick starters. Now, we all know that there is a downside to impulsivity, but framed another way, we are actually the ones that will get started on a project long before people that tend to spin their wheels in research and getting ready to get ready. This is somewhere where we are able to just dive in and start. And let me tell you something. Some of the hardest things I've ever done in life, I would never have done if I had done enough research and truly understood how hard they were going to be, like starting businesses, doing a half Ironman, doing a bodybuilding competition. Wow, those things, I'm very proud that I've done them, but I'm also glad that I didn't do too much research in advance or else I never would have started. So this is really great. When you think about the Kolbe personality test, they define quick starters as people that can innovate and improvise in order to problem solve. So think about how important that is in certain lines of work, especially in technology, in engineering, in science, as well as those other jobs we talked about, like first responders and emergency rooms and things like that. Anywhere where you have to think really fast on your feet and come up with creative solutions on the fly, or just jump into projects and get started without spinning your wheels for weeks and weeks and weeks. That is an area where we really shine. And number 5, last but not certainly least, we are very creative, highly creative. So you may be thinking to yourself, nope, that's not me. I'm not creative. I'm not artistic. But I would argue that. Now, creativity is defined as creating something from nothing. So whether you are, you've got a vegetable garden or you're raising children or you're problem solving in your job on the regular, that is creativity. And because of our neurodiversity and our divergent thinking and our ability to be clear and focused in chaos, it really lends itself to having creative bursts and creative inspiration and think in ways that, neurotypicals generally don't think. Case in point, I recently emceed a book launch for a fellow ADHDer. He is the host of the Stacking Benjamins podcast. And he had given me some prompt questions to ask him during the event. And one of them was, how did you come up with the story for the book? which is a personal finance book. And he said, well, most personal finance stories or books are really boring. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could create a personal finance book that was structured like a Hardy Boys mystery novel? And wouldn't that make it far more interesting? And I remember sitting there thinking, who else but an ADHDer would be able to put the Hardy Boys and personal finance together into a book and make it interesting? So that's just one example of how we're able to bring completely different things together. And when they intersect, they are just so novel and interesting. So those are the 5 things that I have been seeing across the board, not only in my clients, but just every ADHD person I meet. These are the things that make us unique. On top of that, we all have our own individual strengths. I highly encourage you to figure out what those strengths are. And the best way to do it is to go to the VIA Character Strengths, which is work done out of University of Pennsylvania, and understand what your character strengths are. You can do an assessment. It's totally free, and it will inform the essence of who you are and how those strengths show up in your everyday life. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please let me know, comment below, give me a like, and hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, guys.